Redd, so great to talk to you today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Such a pleasure. And you are really such a master guitarist. I really like to unlock how you came to be, your influences, and how you started. First of all, you're Canadian, right?
Yes, sir. From Vancouver, Canada, originally.
Right. And your father played music.
Yeah, my dad bought a guitar when he was 30 and thought, hey, I can do this. And about 5 years later, he was playing in a band on weekends, like a wedding band, doing that. So he loved music, and him and my mother had a lot of different, diverse kind of records. My dad liked a lot of R&B and blues and Motown, that kind of stuff, and old country. He liked Buck Owens and Ray Price, Merle Haggard, that kind of stuff. And my mom was she liked Ella Fitzgerald and Etta James and a lot of the Motown stuff and more pop kind of stuff, I guess. She liked, like all women, she liked Engelbert and Tom Jones. Probably more than for the music, but anyway, so we had a lot of different kinds of music to listen to, and but I hadn't thought anything of playing music at all or cared about it or any of that. And the guitar is my brother's, who's a year older than me, and being a middle child, I got everything, his shoes and his pants and his guitar. So, of course, I didn't want the guitar because that was one more thing of his that wasn't my own, brand new. And, I just kind of felt like, I guess some middle kids feel a little ripped by not getting their own stuff. It's always hand-me-down stuff, So I didn't want to do it more on that alone. I mean, the interest was probably there, I guess, or obviously there. I don't know.
But did you show any musical aptitude prior to really touching the guitar?
No.
Right. You have amazing ears. Do you have perfect pitch or relative pitch?
I've been accused of it, but no, I think it might be relative.
Accused, that's great.
I don't think it's perfect, but I mean, I practiced as a kid when I first found out about tuning and things like that. I was probably 12 or 13, I guess, maybe 12. So I figured out back then, in those days, we had the phone on the wall, and everybody's house had a phone, and you picked the phone up, and it was a dial tone. That was an F, so I could tune to that.
How did you figure out that was an F?
Well, my mom had an organ that she played, so that thing was automatically in tune, I guess, electric-wise, and so I hit the note on the organ and go, oh, that's an F note. Okay, got that. So if I tune my guitar to F, then I could tweak it from there,
Right. Did you play any piano or organ?
No, not at all. Not even chopstick.
Did your mom ever explain any concepts to you?
Oh, no, nothing at all. She would sit there and at the organ and play. It was a double layer thing, a left hand for the bass and a right hand. It was like a little Hammond, cheap Hammond. It wasn't a B3, a good one. It was I don't know what you'd call it, a B1 or a half or something. It was a real low-grade job. And anyway, she would play Christmas songs with a Christmas book, and because she played accordion as a girl, so my dad got her that organ, and so she played it not very often, maybe 6 times a year at the most, but that it was there and plugged in, so I'd hit notes on it and try and find them on the guitar and try and just out of being nosy, I guess, wanting to find out what those notes were. And hers lit up and had I think it had notes on the keys.
When you picked up the guitar, did you feel like you needed lessons, or did you have an attitude that you wanted to self-teach yourself?
No, I fought all the way. My dad said, he said to me and my brother, said, you guys should take up music, and it's a fun thing and it's wonderful. And they only did, a lot of good preaching on it. And my brother was like, yeah, okay. So he took up the guitar and I was like, nah, I just want to play soccer, that kind of thing, a little kid. And so that came around, and my brother 3 months later, I don't like the guitar, Dad, I want to play the drums, So he ended up taking up the drums and became a really, really good drummer, and who still plays today up in Vancouver. And so my dad was like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I looked at that guitar because I knew that was coming my way. So I went, nah, I want to play the bass, Dad. So he said, well, I think if you play the guitar first, that might help you as a bass player. I said, nah, I'm not buying that. Well, he's my dad. What would he know, first off? And second is like, why would that have anything to do with it? Of course, now I realize, yeah, if you know where all the chords are and all of that on the guitar, then it's not a problem to play bass other than the physical thing of your right hand fingers, and so but of course I didn't buy that. I just thought, nah, you just trying to get out of buying a bass. So I get stuck with this guitar of my brother's. So he was like, oh yeah, I think it'd be great. I'll even sign you up for lessons. I was like, oh no. So I'd had lessons probably about 3 months, I guess.
Yep.
And then the teacher fired me because I wasn't learning to read.
Right. Oh, that's a segue. So do you read? Do you sight read? Is that a skill that you utilize?
Well, when I when I was 14, I got a chance to. I was fixing guitars at a music store, and the teacher had quit. The guitar teacher quit. So the store said, "Hey, you want to teach?" And I was like, "Well, no, I can't. I can't read or nothing." And they said, "Well, it's not really that hard. Here's book one." So I took the Alfred's book one course, which is what I had at the very beginning when I first started with lessons.
Right.
So I just learned to read really quick through the book one thing, and of course those books are so self-explanatory. It was to me anyway, and so I pretty much stayed 1 or 2 lessons ahead of my students by ahead of them on the same book, and that way I could make money so I could buy guitars. That was my goal.
So are you a good sight reader, Redd?
No, horrible. But I can tell you what the notes are and the values and all that kind of stuff, but I can't sight read or that kind of even look at the thing, look over it once and then play it. No way. If you play it for me, then I can copy you note for note.
When did you start to transcribe things off records?
Probably by the time I was 11 or 12. I guess I would sit with a record player. I had a little record player and put my quarters and nickels on it with a Band-Aid to weigh it down.
Did that change the pitch?
If I put it on 16, oh yeah, it dropped it down a little. But to me, it slowed it down so I could figure out the fast stuff.
Yeah. And how long would you spend doing something like that?
Oh, God, as long as they'd let me. If I had to come up for supper or whatever, then I would do it. But I just, the hook went in, I think, around then as far as wanting to really figure this thing out and go, wow, I guess I'm not so dumb. I can figure that out, looking at it that way as a kid.
Which records are we talking about here?
Well, my mom had and dad had like Waylon. They had Waylon's first album. I think I never did get it until much later, and I'm still working on it. But Jerry Reed's first album, my dad had that, and he had some Chet Atkins albums. So I tried to figure out, some instrumentals, old ones back then called Freight Train, and the Bells of St. Mary is another melody tune to learn. And so I worked on those and the Wildwood Flower and just the old country kind of standard picking sort of tunes. And then the Buck Owens stuff, that just was like, oh my God, I got to figure that out, whatever that is. It's beautiful. And it was, the instrumentals that those guys played. And so that was kind of my mission, was getting on the Merle Haggard's band was called The Strangers, and they had 6 instrumental albums out over the years. And then Buck Owens' band, they probably had the 6 or 7 albums as well as just the Buckaroos with no singing, all playing. So I had those, and I just wore that shit out trying to figure it out,
Well, how did you know, Redd, to use your ear? Was your ear something that was important, that you consciously knew, I need to develop this?
No, I didn't think about it. I just thought that's the only way you can do this because, I got kicked out of my lesson deal, so we can't afford lessons anyway. So there's only a way. And there's, there was later on, there was 2 other kids that played. So we all 3 would hang out together and play and share our stories. Oh, I learned this lick from a Deep Purple record. Oh, cool. I learned this from a Led Zeppelin. How'd you do that? And kind of did it that way. But up until that point, it was strictly no choice but to do it by ear if you want to try and figure it out. There's no other way to get it. So it wasn't like I need to work on that,
Yep. And there's interesting, you said in an interview where you were sitting at the door listening to a band playing, and you learned their tunes note for note just by listening to them, and then eventually they got you on to play with the band. Was this in Canada?
Yeah, this was in Canada when I was about 15. It was 21 and in the bars for the age, so they wouldn't let me in. So I would sit outside and listen, and my parents split up. So I was with my dad, and he was out playing poker and shooting pool. So I'd take off and go to the clubs and listen to these bands play. And there was one real good country band with a good guitar player. So I listened to all their stuff, and, you know, they had records out kind of locally or regionally or whatever. And he had a couple instrumentals, and they had those in the little cafe in our little town. And I would go to that cafe and plug in that jukebox and play those instrumentals and listen to them over and over, run across the street to the music store, pick up a guitar, and figure out the rest of it. You know,
that's incredible. Okay, so eventually you found your way to LA. So you developed in Canada, you played quite a bit there, then you moved to LA. And you mentioned that LA was an eye-opening experience for you. What was that like, going into LA, and what was your level like at the time? How old were you?
I was 26 when I moved there. So I'd already been playing in bands and done some TV shows in Canada, and I'm not a lot, but I probably played on about half a dozen albums, recording and things like that. So as far as I was concerned at that age, I knew it all, Then when I got there, it was like, whoa, I guess I don't,
And you stayed quite a few years there, right?
Yeah, I was in LA for about 4 years before. Actually, when I moved from Vancouver, I was in the province of Alberta. Then I stopped in Vancouver to see my mother, say hi and bye to her. And my dad was gone by then, so I stopped to say hey to her in case I got killed, in the States, not knowing what I was getting into, So I went through from Vancouver. I just headed straight south. And the first place I stopped was in Redding, California, because I heard Merle Haggard lived there. So I thought I could run into him at the grocery store. Of course, he's on the road all the time. But
right.
So I did that, and I went to Santa Cruz. I hung out there for about 7 months, and then San Jose for about 8 months. And then I went to L.A. for about 4 years. So the L.A. was the musical, holy shit, look at these guys. Because I got to see all these different kind of players that because of the GIT Guitar Institute, and there was another one called Dick Grove Music, and all these music police kind of people's schools there. And they had a lot of teachers, and of course, LA is full of everybody and all kinds of styles. So I got to see, Frank Gambale play in a bar in a little restaurant. Who was amazing jazz speed picker guy, and I got to see Mundell Lowe and a trumpet player with Jack Shelton in a jazz bar there. Albert Lee was playing at a club.
Did you decide to be focused on country and that style of music early on, or is that something you grew into?
Well, no, as a kid, I think like every other kid, I liked. My brother was a year older, so he had paper route money before I did, so he could buy records, and he had a lot of rock records, and I just loved that stuff. And but my parents had a lot of country and blues, and I loved that stuff too because they listened to it. And I think as a little kid, I remember on the weekends they would have maybe one or two couples over on the weekends and party. Then they'd move the furniture and they'd play those records all night long while we're trying to sleep, on the weekend. So I remember hearing that stuff probably through osmosis and loving it. And so I always liked that stuff. And even as a teenager, me and my brother, we would play in little rock bands we had with neighborhood kids. But I always had the country stack on the bottom. I guess somewhat embarrassed because, kids in school that are teenagers, they don't want to hear any country, but I loved it. So I always had my country stack, my Jamie Bryant, Lefty Frizzell, and Merle was all on the bottom of my rock records, so I would listen to it. Friends came over, they would see the stack and go through all, 10 of the rock records and go, oh, cool. They'd never get to the bottom and see that I like country.
Right.
So I always liked it. And then by the time I was probably 14, I was playing in some country bands that were playing on the weekends. And that's what got me really into going, wow, this is great stuff, and it's hard to play properly, and this is a real challenge. So from that point on, I went, wow, I think this is what I want to chase, is the country thing, though I still listen to the blues and the rock and roll, and, And, and liked all that stuff, but mainly focused on the country thing because I was working, fairly steady in country bands, playing on the weekends and then eventually 6 nights a week. So if I wanted to keep doing that, I figured I had to kind of hone my craft and get better at it. And so I really need to work on it,
What an intense regime you've had. You've mentioned you practice something like 8 to 10 hours in a hotel and then play like a 5-hour gig. Let's get into this. So those 8 to 10 hours practicing in a hotel, what were you specifically working on? Would you be working on scales or chord progressions? How would you practice?
I had a suitcase. I had 2 suitcases. When I left home at 17, I was on the road all the time. And in Canada back then, you would play 6 nights at one place in a bar hooked onto a hotel, stay in the hotel, travel Sunday, go to the next place, the next town, set up Monday morning, play Monday through Saturday, 2 shifts on Saturday, leave Sunday, go to the next one. So each hotel that you played at, you stayed in the hotel. So to me, it was like I had nothing to do. I didn't know anybody, and I didn't care because all I wanted to do was play. So I would sit and practice in the room. So I had a suitcase full of cassette tapes that I had been making and buying, and back in those days, guys would make copies of cassettes and, hey, have you heard this new Chet Atkins record? No, I haven't. Oh, I got it here, and burn you a copy. So we were beating Napster back then, I guess, as far as pirating and stuff. But so I had lots and lots of instrumental cassette tapes back then, and I would sit with those and practice. Of course, back in then, you couldn't slow the tape down like you can today on YouTube. So I just sit over and over and over and over and over and spend hours and hours. So that's where I spent my time, was mostly with the cassette tapes, trying to learn the instrumentals. And then, the singing records that I liked that were, even the commercial stuff on the radio, all the licks in the background. To me, that was more intriguing than the song or the singing or any of that. So I would have a tape of, Ray Price's new album, and if there was some guitar on it or steel guitar, I'd try and steal all that stuff too.
How did you self-educate yourself with regards to the theoretical understanding of the right notes over the right chords, the number system chords in terms of the key? Did you self-teach yourself? Did you ask people to help you? How did you develop that?
Well, I felt I was real dumb, so I was embarrassed to ask. So all the bands that I were in, that every one of them would have 1 or 2 guys that to me were like super smart, and they knew the number system. So I just kind of pay attention, and they'd say, okay, it goes to the 4. And, okay, And finally I put it together and go, okay, if we're in C and they holler 4, that means F. Okay. So I would do that, and I learned all my keys. Okay, G's 4 is a C, and the 5 is a D, 6 is an E. Most of the time it's a minor, those kind of things. But I didn't know the number system at that point as far as what it was and how it worked. But I learned it kind of back asswards by learning, the 4 of something is that chord, and learning because I knew the chords and the names. So it made it easy to go, okay, if we're in G and they holler 4, that means a C. But I didn't think about the scale, that it's simpler than that. It's the notes of the scale. If you're in the key in G, 1, 2, 3, 4, all of those are those notes in that scale. I mean, you can't blow it up. You can't wreck it. It's that simple. So, but I didn't know that at the time. And it took, probably 10 or 15 years before I figured out that part of it, where I went, oh, that's the advantage of the number system. It don't matter what key you're in. You just move the 1 and you start in another letter, So eventually I figured that stuff out. And then, but all the time, traveling, a lot of driving, that kind of stuff. I had an 8-track player back in those days in my car, and I'd listen to that stuff, and I'd listen to the radio, and I'd try and figure out what key the bands were playing in on those songs. And I'd have my guitar in my lap in the car, too, with the neck sticking out the window, and I'd strum it. Oh, it's a G. Okay, I got that now. Next time something came around, I'd go, I'll see. I bet that's an F, and I'd play it. Sure enough. Eventually, I'd get where I could guess the keys really, really good. So I think in that way, that's where I developed what hearing I have as far as having a relative sort of pitch, by relating those sounds and learning it that way. And then, playing guitar way too much for too many hours, like you, I'm sure you can tell where a guy is on the keyboard just by the sound of the note, like the texture of the note. I could tell on the guitar if a guy is on his D string on the 7th fret, that he's playing a B note. A wound string has a different sound than a plain string.
When did you actually decide on the Telecaster?
Well, when I had I think I was 12, and I wanted to be Ritchie Blackmore, so I saved up to buy a Stratocaster. And my dad took me to a pawn shop. We bought a 58 Stratocaster, and I got one back then. It was $90, with a cardboard case, and I had it. And then about a year later, my dad comes home with a 58 Esquire that he won in a pool game with a guy that owned a music store. A buddy of his owned a music store, so he beat him pretty bad, I guess, in a pool game. He said, well, come to the store and pick something out, So he came to his music store and he picked out this old 58 Esquire. This was in, I don't know, probably 1970 or something like that. So it was an old guitar, but not worth anything really, but it was in brand new condition. It hadn't been used. Somebody had bought it in 58, played it, for maybe 6-8 months, put it under the bed, and then brought it in and traded it in on a piano or something. So he wound up getting that guitar, bringing it home, and he said, here, you got to try this guitar out. And I was like, oh, cool, that looks like the one Buck Owens has. And he says, yeah, same thing. I ought to get you that same sound. I was like, wow, there, I'm in, So I ended up, I had to make my payments on it with my paper route money, and he wouldn't let me take it anywhere until it was paid for, but I could bring friends over and show it to them, but trying to learn the value of the money thing, and, you don't have nothing until it's paid for kind of thing.
Right.
Anyway, that was my first Telecaster, and it was an Esquire, which is a one pickup Telecaster with just the bridge pickup, no neck pickup. So it's basically the real Telecaster sound is that bridge pickup, the bulk of it, So I had that guitar from when I was probably 14, I guess, on, and I played it exclusively. I didn't touch the Stratocaster very, very seldom after that, and I still have that 58 Esquire.
Redd, why is the Telecaster so ubiquitous in country music?
Well, I just think that's what those guys were using back then. I mean, Buck Owens, Merle Haggard, a bunch of those guys were California bands, and those guitars are made in California. So I think they were readily available. And at that point, in the 50s, they were cheap. They were $170 new. So, I mean, that's a lot of money, but it wasn't as much as $250 for a Gibson. So I think a lot of country guys went, oh, unless they had an old Gibson already, if they got some to buy a new one, they would buy Fenders, and seemed like the Stratocaster was more of a rock and roll thing, and the Telecasters were cheaper, so they bought those, and I think that just maybe is what they wound up banging on, and that became part of that sound. So all the kids that like that sound want to copy it, they go buy a Telecaster,
You mentioned in addition to the 10 hours that you'd be practicing in the hotel room, then you'd play something like a 5-hour gig.
Oh, yeah, it was a full-blown bar gig, I would play these bars, either cabarets or taverns that were hooked onto the hotel, and some of them were as big as 700 seats up in Canada back in the 70s, and some were as small as maybe 150. But they always had a dance floor and a bandstand, so you played from 9 to 2, 45 on, 15 off all night. And that was a 6 nights a week thing, and Saturday you played from, I think it was 1 till 6, or 2 till 6 in the afternoon, and did a matinee where people in the crowd could get up and sing with the band if they wanted to. And so I grew up doing that lifestyle, and that's where I learned a lot of that stuff, was by playing in those bands 5 hours a night. You can't help but get tired of your own playing the same shit over and over and over. You go, I got to do something different. I'm going to try this. Oops, 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 until you get it right.
Now, when you moved from LA to Nashville, in Nashville, you must have been conscious that that's kind of like the home of country music. And so,
oh, totally. That was the goal.
Was that your goal in the beginning, to eventually find your way to Nashville?
Yeah, that was my total goal. I mean, being from Vancouver on the West Coast, I thought, I'll swing down through LA. I've never been there. I'll see what it's like, and I'll noodle my way across the country and eventually end up in Nashville as my main. That's where I want to land and end up at. So I just kind of tootled my way across the country, but luckily I got to work the whole time playing my way across.
Were people surprised that a Canadian is just burning it up playing country music? Or was the country music scene in Canada large and it was normal?
Well, in Canada, back then, there was a huge country scene. I mean, out in the West, every bar or every little town had 2 bars or hotels, and one was country and one was rock. There was nothing else at that time, in the 70s. So there was lots of country music. And it was all back then, it was all basically traditional country music. So you either played really old 40s, 50s dead guy stuff, or you played the current 70s Conway Twitty and, that kind of music. So there was, in that way, it was a lot smaller of a world of learning, where today, you could say country music. Well, there's 100 different kinds, unless you ask an old guy, but there's bluegrass,
there's all sorts of different styles. And
right. Yeah, in Canada, there was, I don't know of any bluegrass ever up in Canada. I'm sure there were small pockets of it hidden somewhere, but I was never aware of any of it, and now, of course, with the internet, shit, it's everywhere. It's awesome, but
yeah.
So when I got to Nashville, I was, I think learned enough about the music and its history, and having all those records when I was a kid. And that was my goal. I kind of didn't give a shit if I played it when I got there. I just wanted to go to the Opry and see if I could see Buddy Emmons playing pedal steel somewhere, and if I could see, Jimmy Capps playing guitar, and Pete Wade and all these guys, Grady Martin, that were on these records. That was my goal. I wanted to see them play and see how they did it, to see if I was even close to being on the right track. That was my goal. It was nothing to do with, if I had to swing a shovel or an axe, it didn't matter to me. I was okay with that. I didn't expect that I'd get any work playing even, I really did. I just wanted to go see those guys play. That was my goal.
I'm so interested in how you construct your melodic ideas. Let me read you a quote. Buddy Whittington was interviewed in 2012 on Music Radar, and he's with the John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, and he was asked what he practices, and he said, "I try to play something new every day, usually something melodic with cool chords." Redd Volkaert. So you really are so respected, and your ideas, your concepts of improvisation are really impressed many top musicians. I have so many questions on this area. I think the first question is, are you influenced by non-guitarists? Like, do you like harmonica players, violinists who play country music, pianists? Do you have other influences outside of the guitar?
Oh, totally. Yeah, as a kid, in Canada, every band I was ever in had a fiddle player, and the big bands had a fiddle and a steel. So to me, those were just like, wow, they're way different than me. They're freaks, but to me, because I didn't understand what they were doing or how they did it on their instrument, but A note's an A note. Who gives a shit? It's great stuff. So I wanted to learn all of that, and so I studied, and hey, what are you doing when we play this song, Nightlife? What are those funky chords you're hitting on the steel? So I would try and find that voicing more than they'd say, okay, play an E flat chord. I go, okay, here's an E flat, but mine doesn't sound like yours. What are you doing? Oh, I flattened the fifth, but on the low end, not on the high end. Oh, okay. So I would figure out those voicings.
That's fantastic.
So I got a, E flat 7 flat 5, and then just whatever they did. And their major seventh, they would do it on the high end, not the low end. And, that kind of thing. And Western swing stuff does everything on the low notes. All the alternate, funny, nuance, add-ons are all done on the low end of the spectrum, so that they're not in the vocal range or the timbre of the melody. If you're playing an A chord and you want to play an A6, if you're a pop or a rock guy, you add it up on the high end of the register, in either on your E or your B string, where Western swing and jazz guys, they put it all on the D string or the A string, an octave lower, so that it's not in the way of where the vocal's going, because if it's in that higher register, that dictates that the singer cannot sing a dominant 7 when you're playing a 6, or you got the dissonant stink.
What are you actually learning right now? Like, what do you practice, Redd? Are there concepts that you're curious about and exploring?
I am, but I'm kind of in a different spot as far as sitting down with a guitar and learning. I don't do that so much anymore, because now I can listen to stuff and hear where they're going on the track. So I could say, oh, they're going from this to that, whatever it is, and then I can pick up a guitar and go, okay, it's kind of like this, and oops, oh, there it is. I can do that and figure it out that way, So, but I listen to everything. I mean, everything. I got all kinds of, I make up these little, what do you call those, little thumb drive? So I have and I got a Bob Wills thumb drive, a Merle thumb drive, a Jeff Beck thumb drive, all kinds of Ronnie Earl blues stuff. And I listen to that stuff all the time, because I do a lot of driving to gigs. I'm playing all the time. And that's what I've always done. So I play all the time. I play almost every night somewhere. So I'm putting in a minimum of 3 hours a night playing. And then on the way to the gigs, I'm listening to different stuff, and that gives me ideas. And I go, I'm listening to something, and I'll hear it. And I may have heard it 30 times, but maybe the 31st time I'll go, hey, that would fit if I used a piece of that in this song, one of my tunes, that kind of thing. So that way I'm always trying to incorporate different stuff so that I don't play exactly the same thing every day.
What bores you what things don't you like when it comes that you want to try to avoid in playing?
Modern country bands. Yeah, because it just doesn't do it for me. I guess because now I'm an old guy, I don't matter anyway. So it's like, all of that. So to me, it's like, I don't care to even hear that stuff. Somebody says, oh, let's go hear this band. And I think, okay, let's go hear this band. And they're all like 25. And of course, like me, when I was 25, they know it all. You can't tell them nothing. And they're playing the wrong chords. And, they don't, and their solos are just shit solos that are Mickey Mouse stuff. And it's like, so it's really hard to take and listen to. So in that way, that's stuff that bores me to death.
Redd, did you ever meet Chet Atkins?
No, I stared at him for about an hour one time. When I moved to Nashville, he used to go to this pancake place during the week. So I sat across from him at about 4 or 5 tables away. But I saw about 3 people come up to him and shake his hand while he was eating. And I thought, I don't want to be that guy, because it might piss him off. He's trying to have his breakfast, and it's getting cold because he's having to talk to these other guys like me that want to wear him out about stuff he's probably tired of talking about. So I just never did it. But I wanted so bad to go and shake his hand and just kiss his hand even, and even walk away. But I didn't have the guts to do it. So I saw him. I didn't get to talk to him or nothing.
You did work with Merle Travis, though.
I kind of did. I played in an awards show one time in Nashville, and him and Joe Maphis were there for the awards, so they got up and played, and I backed them up in the band that was the core band that did the awards show.
Right.
So technically I did, but I wasn't on the road with them or none of that,
Now, you are really a huge influence to the younger generation. And a great example is Brad Paisley. Let me read you a quote by Brad Paisley. He said, somebody asked him in an interview, who are your biggest influences on guitar? And Brad Paisley said, my grandfather, he taught me how to play. Then he said, Redd Volkaert. Just because he's a great player, I was excited he was able to play on Spaghetti on the Mud album. Moving on, he said, I learned a lot about finding things that's unique, exploring notes that aren't always used from guys like Redd Volkaert. The first time I ever heard him play, he was doing an amazing amount of different things. He could go right from Charlie Christian to Roy Nichols and keep things interesting by throwing all these different influences. So someone like Brad Paisley really looks up to you, and you're good friends with him.
Yeah, he's a wonderful person.
And he would watch you play when you were on the bandstand, and he would just look at your playing and look at your rig and try to absorb what he could from you.
Oh yeah, when before he got his record deal, he was living in Nashville trying to get it going. But I was playing downtown at a bar, and he used to come and see me all the time. And I never, I didn't really know him. He'd come and he'd look at my pedal board and see what I had and ask me, hey, what kind of pickups you got? And normal guitar nerd stuff, and he was a nice kid, and I said, you play? He said, yeah, I'm trying to get my own thing going here in town. I was like, okay, cool, good luck, And we talk a little bit here and there, and then pretty soon, boom, he makes it. He's big shit. And by then I'd moved out here to Texas, so he comes through town and he was doing where they'd travel around, him and a manager, an acoustic guitar, and they go to the radio stations and plug their new record without a band. So he'd come and see me play a bunch, and then we hooked up again from there. And he said, hey, I don't know if you remember me. I said, oh yeah, I remember you. And you got a Paisley Telecaster. It's a 68 with a maple cap neck and all stuff, and talk about guitar talk stuff, and. So, yeah, we just hit it off, and I think from then on, we were really good buddies because he's as sick about guitars as I am, obviously. Listen to him play,
So, Redd, does Brad Paisley ask you questions about, Redd, how do you do that? And does he kind of ask you to, give him, I wouldn't say lessons, but, does he ask you a lot of music questions?
No, not so much music, more guitar stuff like gear. Pickups and wiring and things like that. A lot about that kind of stuff, and he would say, "Who do you listen to? What kind? Who's your heroes?" Kind of stuff, But not. We never sat down and here's a lick. Here, do this. No, it's like this. We never did that. He don't have to. He plays too good.
What about Vince Gill? And what's your relationship with Vince and working with him?
Well, I first met him. I was playing in the Printer's Alley, which is a little area in Nashville, and had a bunch of clubs in it, and I played there 6 nights a week. I did 10 till 2:45 every night. And Vince came in there a few times with some buddies, I guess, to come watch me play, and we'd always get him up to sing, so that's where I got to know him. And we became friends from then. And then I played in some other bands and stuff, did TV shows that he was on and some other concerts. And so we were always buds, and he knew I was into vintage guitars like he is, and so we always talked about guitars and stuff too. And so I got to play with him a little bit and do some recording with him. And, we always, guitar nerd stuff, because we're two guys kind of along the same lines. Like he's an unbelievable singer and songwriter, and he's got all that stuff going. But underneath all that, he's still a 14-year-old kid that's nuts about the guitar.
I read an amazing anecdote with you and Eric Johnson when you first met him, and something about him telling you that you could get a completely different sound by just reversing your guitar cable with the amp.
Yeah, he's, when he said that, I said, you must not have cable TV, He said, what do you mean? I said, you got too much time on your hands, buddy. Yeah, I think if you spend that kind of time turning a chord around to listen to it, you must be really bored. But I didn't know about that myself, and he told me about it, and the way that he explained it was awesome. He said, when you play at one club and you get some nights you play there and your stuff sounds great.
Yeah.
He said, other nights you play there and your sound sucks. And I said, shit, that's most of the nights, but I know what you're saying. And he says, well, he said, I think what I've found is if I make all my chords hook up the same way every day, I take that out of the equation of why it sounds bad. And that made perfect sense to me, because you think, well, if you go in there on a Monday and for some reason you stuff sounds good, you go back on a Friday and it doesn't sound good, what's different? I mean, in a way, nothing really should have changed. So if you're getting real picky about it and you make, you mark your chords, say, okay, I listen to the chord and which way does this chord sound best? This direction. So I mark it that the one that goes in the amp always has a mark of some kind. And so if it goes from the guitar to the amp, that end's marked. The one that goes from the pedal board to the amp, that one's marked. That way they're always hooked up the same way every time you play. So then if it doesn't sound good, maybe it's because the cash register is dinging or the neon sign behind you is drawing more current. So then it's those things. But chances are you'll have more consistent nights by hooking your stuff up the same way every day. So that was like, wow, revelation,
Now, I wanted to ask you about Albert Lee. You mentioned that when you were younger, you learned from a tape of his. I think maybe somebody passed you a copy of a tape with Albert Lee, or you burned a copy.
Yeah, he had back then. I forget. I think it was called Hot Licks. Was a tape company.
Yeah,
it was a cassette tape company that put out like
an instructional
guitar
video?
lick lessons.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like an instructional thing, way before the video. Yeah, you could buy a little cassette tape, and then he would say, okay, let's tune up. And he'd play, here's the E string, ding, 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 tune up to that. And then he'd say, okay, here's my lick. I'm in the 5th fret, starting on the D string. And he'd go, blah, 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 play a lick. And he'd break it down, and you'd go walk through it. So I had a copy of one of those tapes. So I learned all the stuff on there, of course, because I was like, wow, that guy could play. And then I met him. I was probably about 19, and he came through Calgary, Canada, with the Everly Brothers, and the girl that was opening for them on their tour was from Fort Worth, Texas, but I'd played in her band when she came to Canada. I toured with her. So anyway, she brought them over to my gig after they finished their gig in Calgary. And so I met Albert Lee then. Of course, I was shitting my pants. I was so scared because he's sitting down in front watching me play. And so we took a break. I went down and, they introduced me to him. And I was like, oh, wow, here's Phil Everly and, Don Everly. And I was, oh, nice to meet you. And oh, hey, Albert, I wanted to talk to him, not to Everly.
Right.
So, of course, right away, I'm a nervous wreck, so I start spewing about his guitars and his pickups and his amps, and he's like, hey, he says, relax. He said, we don't have to talk about gear. I love your playing. Just sit down. Let's just visit. And I was like, what? What's wrong with this guy? He didn't want to talk about equipment, and I was just like a 10-year-old just going crazy on him. And so it was like, wow. And then after, about a week later, I thought about it, and I went, oh, that was pretty cool of him to shut me down in a nice way and say, hey, it's not about all that. Let's just be here, kind of a thing. And I was like, wow, what a cool guy. And then I didn't see him for probably 8 years, and he remembered me. And I was like, holy shit, what kind of a guy is that? He's awesome. That was when I was in L.A., and we played together some then. So we've been kind of, long distance pals from then on.
That's great. Redd, what I want to do now is I want to end off with some fun questions. These are not serious. You could just, whatever comes to mind, it's like a hot seat. I'm going to ask you like top 3 this, top 3 that, and you just, whatever comes to mind, and just let's just have a little fun with this. So top 3, in your opinion, blues guitarists, go.
I'd say Ronnie Earl, Albert King, and Johnny Winter.
Right. And how about top 3 jazz guitarists?
Charlie Christian, Jimmy Rivers. I don't know. The rest play too fancy for me.
How about now top 3 country guitarists?
Well, Roy Nichols, Don Rich, and Jimmy Bryant.
Favorite bass players? Who are your top 3 favorite bass players?
My top 3 would be Joe Osborne, Bob Moore, and Henry Strzelecki.
What was your proudest musical moment?
Hanging up the phone when Merle Haggard said, come and play with us.
And in fact, you mentioned that when Roy Nichols had retired from the band and you were before you were selected as the successor, something like 5 out of the 8 people in the band voted that you should come on and replace him.
Right. So I spent the rest of my time getting even with those other 3.
That was great. Okay. If somebody'd never heard of you and you could give them just 3 records of your playing, which would you give?
Oh, I would say my first CD, Telewacker. And then Merle Haggard's, the hell's the name of it? Oh, man, what's the name of it? We did an album with Merle, and he did a Blaze Foley song on it. That's called "If I Could Only Fly." That's I think that's some good playing on that. But it's me, but
that's right, 2000.
Pretty good record. And a lot of people seem to like. Merle had one called "Live at Billy Bob," and that's live, so it's a lot more feisty kind of.
Live at Billy Bob's Texas in 1999.
Yeah.
Redd, if you could improvise or you could jam with anyone in history, I mean, even like Mozart if you wanted to, who would you choose to jam with?
It'd be Roy Nichols, hands down.
What was you knew Roy?
Well, I met him, but it was after he had a stroke, so of course he couldn't talk.
How did he influence you in your playing?
Well, just what I liked about it is that he played plain old regular twangy country stuff, but always somewhere in every solo he snuck in a little jazzy Django Reinhardt or some kind of Charlie Christian, or not necessarily quotes, but he would sneak in just a half of a phrase. Like if it was a 5 going to a 1, he would augment it. Or, if he started on the 1, he would start on a 1 diminished and throw everybody off. With that kind of, he had a really sneaky, great approach of throwing a wrench into what you're listening to, yet it didn't mess up the song. So to me, he was like the king of that stuff.
Do you know Hank Garland?
No, I never did. I got all of his music, of course, but and the movie and all that stuff, but no, I never did get to meet him. And I took a bunch of pictures and stared at his guitar in L.A. that was at Guitar Center.
If you could go back and let's say you were your teacher when you were a kid, let's say you got to meet your future self and you got to teach yourself as a kid, what would you have done differently about your music education?
I'd have said, don't do it. It's a trick. No, I guess I would probably say learn to read first as much as you can stand it as a kid. I'm sure no kid wants to go through all of that, but I really believe that had I learned how to read as a kid, I don't know what direction I'd go. It might have changed my whole path, but I think I would be more knowledgeable from that point forward as far as being able to grasp stuff and to pick it up, not only by ear, but you could buy the paper and go, oh, wow, here it is, and you're done, where I can't do that today. So I would say that would be a huge plus for any kid is to learn all your these and thous, and like the drummers, learn your rudiments,
How do you develop great ears?
Well, don't be prejudiced and listen to everything, I think. And the best way to develop it is doing it. Simple as that. There's no getting around that. And I think the way to do that is with your guitar in your hand, listening to stuff and finding it on the guitar. Whether it's listening to the vacuum cleaner and going, oh, that's a B flat, or the phone and it's an F, the dial tone, or, whatever it is. If you hear a train coming by, what is that? What makes that sound? When the whistle blows, it's an E and almost an F, and there's almost a flatted third in there. If it's a 3-note whistle, that's what it is. So find that, figure that out. What is that? And do it with everything. It doesn't matter. It has to be even a bird, listening to the birds in your backyard with your guitar unplugged. Figure that out. I mean, to me, those are sounds, and it doesn't matter. All those sounds are music to somebody.
Redd, what's the most surprising thing musically about you that people would not necessarily know?
I listen to everything, and I mean, somebody that doesn't know me would think, oh, he's just a country guy, and that's the end of it. Yeah, okay, and I'm okay with that. But anybody that knows me knows that I like everything from, Stefan Grappelli and Django Reinhardt to, Oscar Peterson to Nat King Cole to Charlie Pride to all over the map, to Albert King, you pick a name. I love every kind of music that's musical and melodic, I guess I would say.
That's what I've noticed. Top musicians like yourself, they tend to have this very eclectic palette that seems to run the gamut, and it just shows. I mean, the best people seem to listen to everything, and you just, again, are just reaffirming that. I wanted to say, Redd, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. You're really a genius of the guitar, and you're so, all your admiration is merited. And it was such a thrill for me to talk to you. I'd like to end with one final question, which would be, what advice could you give to a young person who wants to learn music and wants to get good at it? What's your advice?
Well, like I said earlier, don't be prejudiced and listen to everything. That way you can make an educated decision on what you like. If you just listen to one thing, you're kind of stuck with that, and you're not going to pay attention to anything else that could possibly be a wonderful help to you down the road. So I say listen to everything. You may not use some of that knowledge, or, if you're a guitar player, listen to the piano players too. You may not use what they're doing because right now it might be too hard of stuff to learn, but listen to it a lot and regular, and eventually you'll get to that level where you can use some of those things, and that's going to help you out in every style of music, wherever you go, whatever you do. And I would say that with every instrument that you listen to. It doesn't matter what it is, because an A note is an A note, and it doesn't care whose instrument it's on.
That's really fantastic advice. Actually, Redd, I do have a goofy question to end off. Who is the greatest Canadian musician?
Oh, man. Guess Oscar Peterson.
That's a good one.
I would say so.
Did you ever meet or know Lenny Bro?
I did get to meet him. I was playing. I got to fill in with this. There was a fellow up in Canada that had a TV show for 38 years named Tommy Hunter, and I got to fill in for a summer tour with him. And he was based out of Toronto, and I was living in Calgary, way out in the west. So he put me up in the hotel downtown Toronto when we were off. We'd be off like 2 or 3 days, then we'd go out for 4 or 5, back for 2 or 3. So at that time, I would stay in downtown Toronto, and there was a club that Lenny Bro played at, fairly regular there. So I went to see him play, and I guess I was probably maybe 20.
Yeah.
20 years old, something like that. So I went and watched him play several times. I was just like, oh my God, he's got like, there's 3 people in that head. He's playing rhythm and lead and harmony, and
that's a
piano coming out of that somehow. It's just like, wow, kind of guy. So, of course, I had his records, and in Canada, he's really famous because he spent a lot of time up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, as a young guy. And his parents were from Maine, the state of Maine in the Northeast. And they came to Canada and played a lot. And he ended up moving to Canada in the 60s. So he's, up there, he's like, ooh, she's like Chet Atkins,
Right.
Everybody loved him and the whole thing. So I knew I was well aware of him and his music, and I had his whatever records he had. I already had that stuff. So to get to see him play live, it was like, wow, there's no overdubbing there. That guy's just shitting it all out in one shot, And it was awesome. It was amazing. So, of course, when he took a break, I waited at the back of the line, and everybody was shaking his hand and hoo-hawing and all of that. So finally come up to me, and I introduced myself, and I said, I'm a big fan, of course, like everybody else in here. And I said, I've been studying under this guy, Big George Moody from Maine. He goes, right away, he went, oh, Big George. He was my teacher when I was a kid, too.
No kidding.
He said, he's an unbelievable player. So, yeah, he was a guitar player that played with his parents when he was about 7, 8 years old. So he taught Lenny a bunch of thumb-picking, Chet Atkins kind of Merle Travis stuff. So, and this Big George had moved to Canada in the 60s, I think probably because of the Vietnam War, I'm going to guess. And so anyway, he played around there, and I got to hook up with him and hang around him and kind of follow his lead. And, I'd go to his gigs and watch him play and try and steal all his stuff. Anyway, so I used that as my end to meeting him. When I dropped his name, it was like, oh, I'm not just a regular schmo in the crowd. Now I'm cool because I knew his teacher. So we talked for quite a while, and he said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm playing with Tommy Hunter. He said, oh, I played on that show a few times. He said, you ever heard of Anne Murray? And I said, oh, yeah, she's big shit here in Canada. He goes, yeah, she fired me.
Oh.
And that, I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't want to get into it, so I didn't say any more about it. I thought it was kind of a funny thing that he would just say that. You know, Anne Murray? Oh, yeah. Yeah, she fired me. That was the end of that conversation, you know. So, yeah, I didn't get to know him or nothing.
Yeah.
It was just
That's a cool story.
A one-night fling when I got to see him play.
Redd, are you friends with Tommy Emmanuel?
Yeah, I actually got to play with him one time here in Austin. These people that own this big theater club in town, they have him come twice a year to play, and it was a few years ago, 4 years ago, was on his birthday, so they booked him for 2 nights in a row. So he did like 2 sets a night. So they had what they did was they called up these guys to come and play and sit in with him. So Eric Johnson was one, and I was one. There was 2 other guys, the guy from Dallas. And
did they record that? Is that recorded? Do we have any audio of that? That must be amazing.
I don't have any of it. I don't know if somebody would record it or not.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Just like a duo. He was doing a solo. So I brought a Telecaster and an amp and set up beside him, and we played. We were only supposed to do 2 songs, and we ended up doing 5 songs. Because I guess he must have had fun kicking my ass. So we did about 5 songs. It was awesome. I'd say he's the best in the world, though. That's for sure.
Well, Redd, you're such a fantastic musician. You're really like world class, and everyone respects and loves you. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was such an honor for me to talk to such a world class musician, and I hope you'll come back again on soon.
You bet. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.